Hi everyone and welcome. Today I'm going to show you all my Grimdark and dark fantasy books that I have on my physical TBR. Now, to be honest, I was first only going to show you the Grimdark books, but if you've seen my Grimdark video and what it means to me, you know that I have a pretty hard time defining Grimdark. What makes a book Grimdark and not just dark fantasy? And it becomes even more difficult if you haven't read the books yet. So I do think that the majority of the books that I have here on this humongous pile next to me are Grimdark, but when I read them, I might define them as just dark. So if you've read any of these, please let me know what your thoughts are, and also let me know if I should pick one of these up as soon as possible. I'm currently making my series to read in 2023 list, so if any of these books should be on that list, let me know. But since I do have quite a bit of books here next to me, without further ado, let's get into the books. And the first book that I have on the list, I don't really hear too many people talk about, but that is The Wolf by Leo Carew. This is the first book in the Under the Northern Sky series, and the second book is called The Spider. I know that this is one of Leanne's favorite series, and she is a big fan of the First Law universe. Now, this one, if I'm not mistaken, is about two clashing cultures. You have the North and you have the South, and at the start of this novel, they have a very brittle peace between them, but then, for whatever reason, the South invades the North. Now, this could be grimdark, this could also be dark. It can go either way because military fantasy, sometimes it's very heroic and very fantastical, so it doesn't really mean that it's grimdark per se. However, on the cover of the book it says, "The next George R.R. Martin." Now, I don't know if that's true, but at the very least they don't compare him to Robert Jordan, so I consider this a plus. Plus, I'm extremely intrigued by the covers, but also the titles. The Wolf, the Spider. It sounds pretty dark and intriguing, so yes, one that I definitely want to give a try soon. Although it seems to be a very specific taste, I know that Liana has recommended it to a couple of other booktubers and most seem to not like it, so we will see. The next series is one that I know is dark fantasy and not grimdark, but since a couple of people have told me that it is quite bleak, I decided to just put it on the list. And that is the 5th season by N.K. Jemisin. So I actually own the entire trilogy, the Broken Earth trilogy. I recently bought it, and since I bought it, some people have told me that it is kind of a genre blend. It's not just fantasy, it also has some sci-fi elements. Normally that's an anti-buzzword for me. However, if it's done well, I can appreciate it. It's just that I'm more difficult to enjoy it. However, I have heard that N.K. Jemisin does some amazing things here, that there's very bleak content, and the entire series is called the Broken Earth trilogy, so it's going to be dark, I suppose. Next up, I have two first installments in a series that were gifted to me by Steve over at Steve Talks Books. Now, Steve knows my taste pretty well, and he is a very big Grimdark fan. So to say that I have very high expectations for these two series is an understatement. The first one is A Drowned Kingdom by P.L. Stewart. Now, this is a Grimdark fantasy series that is based upon the legend of Atlantis. That sounds amazing. I don't know why nobody really uses these legends that are more unique than King Arthur retellings or Robin Hood retellings. I recently put together my myth and legend retelling TBRs, and everything was either King Arthur or Robin Hood. This was the only one that was different and felt unique. Now, besides that, P.L. Stewart, I also had the pleasure of talking to on one of Steve's Friday Conversations videos. He sounded extremely intelligent, but also extremely kind. So that makes me even more curious to read this book and see what such a kind and gentle man has to talk about in a grimdark novel. Color me intrigued. Now, next up, the other gift that I got from Steve, that is Gunmetal Gods by Zamil Akhtar. Now, this is the first one in a Grimdark trilogy, if I'm not mistaken, and in this one we have a holy war. Now, if you don't know me, you just need to know at the very least that I love religion in books, and I love it when we have a holy war, when it shows the dark side of religion, what the dangers can be. So here we follow 50,000 paladins who are baptized in angel blood and are ready to burn the non-believers. Sounds absolutely amazing. I need to read these two. Probably, regardless of what anybody says, I need to put these two on my 2023 TBR. Now, a while ago, I did a first chapter reading challenge. And in that video, I read the first chapter of a couple of starts of series. And the one that I thought had the most 5-star potential, that was the one that I was allowed to start before the end of the year. Now, the one that I have here made number 2. So it barely missed the winning spot. So I haven't read it yet, but I definitely still want to do it next year or hopefully somewhere in the near future. And that is A Cavern of Black Ice. The first book here is Sword of Shadows by J.V. Jones. Now, this is the first book in a 4-book-long series at this point, but the series is not finished yet. So this is a little bit like A Song of Ice and Fire. However, I don't really care too much if a series is unfinished. As long as books are spectacular, that's what matters to me. What I really enjoyed here is the unusual setting. Normally, fantasy is medieval inspired. Sometimes it's a little bit more modern, but that's usually the earliest time point that you see. However, here we have clans. we don't really have a lot of clans in fantasy, it seems. And this one felt quite grimdark already from the start because something very, very significant and very dark happens to the clan that we are following. So yeah, just talking about this one, I'm remembering what I read when I did that first chapter reading challenge. Makes me very excited. But unfortunately, I cannot start all of these, so let me know which ones I should start in 2023. Next up, a series that I will be finishing towards 2023, so at least this one does not need a vote. And that is, first of all, The Trouble with Peace by Joe Abercrombie. I just started this one today, so maybe it's now no longer on the TBR, but this one I need to read, and then I need to purchase the third and final book in the Age of Madness trilogy. But I still also need to get to Sharp Ends by Joe Abercrombie, which is a collection of short stories in the First Law universe. I'm not the biggest fan of short stories, however, I do think that when it's in a universe where you already know the characters, you already know the world, you already know the magic that you have in First Law, which is minimal, I think that short stories are then different and that I will probably enjoy it more than when it's short stories where I don't really have any connection to yet. So these are the two in the First Law world that I still need to read and that I already have on my physical TBR. It does seem like a common theme in Grimdark series is a holy war, because I think that the same is true for The Darkness That Comes Before by R. Scott Baker, which is the first book in the Prince of Nothing series. I actually own the original trilogy, and I do think that I am going to read this one in 2023. If you don't know, I'm currently reading Malazan, but I think that I need to let that one go for now. It just asks too much, being a 10-book long series. However, this one is a trilogy, and I do know that there's a second trilogy and all that, but the first one is just a trilogy. So I think that I can manage this, and I also think that the topic of the Holy War is something that I will enjoy most of all, because That House Gates, the second book in the Malazan Book of the Fallen series, that spoke to me. And I think that maybe the Prince of Nothing series by R. Scott Baker will give me the similar feelings. Also, people have told me that the writing style is a little bit easier to get into than Steven Erikson's writing style. Now, I have heard that this is one of the darkest, most grimdark, most bleakest novels or trilogies that I will ever encounter, so I might be a little bit anxious as well, but I just really want to give this a try because there's a holy war. That's all I need to know, to be honest, to get me excited. Next up, I have a series that I don't really know is Grimdark. I think that because the author has written quite a bit of Grimdark, people immediately stored this in the Grimdark section as well, but I'm not too sure. And that is Red Sister by Mark Lawrence. This is the first book of the Ancestor, if I'm not, the first book in the first book of the Ancestor, something like that. However, I own the entire trilogy, and to be honest, I have read the Broken Empire trilogy by Mark Lawrence, and I did not like that one at all. So I don't really know if I'm going to like this one anymore, because the reason why I did not like the Broken Empire trilogy was not because of the graphic content, not because it was very dark. I just didn't really care for the plot, I didn't care for the characters. So I do hope that this will be different. But like I said, I don't know if this is grimdark. I think that just because Mark Lawrence has written it, a lot of people think so. However, if I'm not mistaken, this follows a nun or somebody who is training to become a nun, but these are fighting nuns, these are crazy nuns, to be honest, where you should be afraid of these nuns. And I think that the first sentence that you have here is, it is important when killing a nun to ensure that you bring an army of sufficient size. Yeah, definitely no nuns that you want to mess with. Next, I have a series that I think I will either absolutely adore, become a new all-time favorite, or I will DNF within the first 100 pages. I feel like there is no in-between in this series. And that is The Traitor Bauer Cormorant by Seth Dickinson. These titles are amazing. I think that when it was self-published, this first one was called The Traitor. Sorry, but The Traitor Bauer Cormorant sounds so much more epic, and it gives me much more excitement to start the series. If I'm not mistaken, here we also have the invaders who come and take over an entire land, but they don't really do it with a lot of violence, they do it through economic means. And we follow Baru Cormorant, who can see that she cannot really fight this foe, because it's much stronger than her, but she tries to destroy it from within. I think that this one has quite a bit of political intrigue as well, and honestly, talking about all of these series makes me want to pick up all of them, but this one sounds amazing. It's also not the longest book ever, it's under 400 pages, so I feel like this is one that I could easily squeeze into a list, right? Yeah, definitely. Next up, a series that I will not be getting to anytime soon, I think, and that is The Wolf's Calling by Anthony Ryan. This is the first one in the Raven's Blade duology. Now, I still need to finish the first one, the Raven's Shadow trilogy, even though I absolutely adored Bloodsong, I adored the second book, The Tower Lord. The third one I'm having a lot of troubles with. I think that it's called Queen of Fire, and I'm still 200 pages from the end. So once I finish that one, I do want to give this duology a try because I absolutely adore Anthony Ryan's writing style. I think that he's very good in characterization, but sometimes he can just take a little bit too long to wrap things up nicely. However, one that I will be getting into, but once I finish the Raven Shadow trilogy, I will need to have a little bit of a break. Now, if you're interested in Anthony Ryan's work, then definitely try Bloodsong. You can read Bloodsong as a standalone. It has this military academy, it has coming of age story, it has Valen, who is an amazing main character, but I can't really say too much about this duology without spoiling the original trilogy, and I haven't even watched the back of the book because I don't want to be spoiled for how the original trilogy ends either. But yes, a duology that I have high hopes for once I finally finish the original trilogy. Now, of course, if we are talking about Grimdark, we need to talk about Lord Grimdark. And for me, that's not Joe Abercrombie, it's Michael R. Fletcher. Now, I have read Beyond Redemption and The Mirror's Truth by him before, and you can definitely see that he is a master in his craft. He has such a unique magic system, such a unique world, and he is very grimdark. I must say that there are definitely points where it felt like it was almost too much for me to still be enjoyable. It's very violent, it's very gritty, it's very bleak, and there are definitely some very graphic scenes as well. A lot of dirt. I don't like dirt. However, I definitely want to try something more by him. I feel like he is one of the very unique authors who tries something different in every trilogy. Now, this is a complete trilogy, if I'm not mistaken, and in this one we follow a main character whose stone heart has been broken into different pieces, and they are scattered across the world. But while he is trying to find them back, he also starts remembering things from his past. One that is definitely intriguing to me, and I just want to see what Michael R. Fletcher does next. After Beyond Redemption, that was such a unique experience, I think that he's going to do something unique in each of his trilogies, and I'm here to discover it. Now, the next book that I have here, I actually don't know if it's grimdark or just dark fantasy, but it sounds pretty cool. And that is Rewrite the Storm by Devin Madsen. Now, in this one we have a God Emperor. That's basically all I need to know. But this God Emperor gets betrayed and then the country is at the verge of war. I think that we also have a princess here who is held captive in her own castle. And that's something that I find just very intriguing because I think that this will be character driven in that aspect and that I will root for this princess, for this underdog. So something that I need to try. This is also one of those books that I've had on my TBR for way too long. The entire trilogy is finished at this point and I don't really have an excuse to not just try this one. The I don't know if this is grimdark or just dark fantasy continues with The Wolf of Oren-Yaro by K.S. Veloso. This is the first book in the trilogy of the Bitch Queen. Well, it does not really sound as very traditional fantasy, right? I think that in this one we have a queen who's been betrayed by her husband a couple of years ago. Betrayed. I think that he just left and a lot of people think that she killed him, which is not the case. But then one day she receives a message from him to talk things over. I don't know too much about this, but I have heard that this has quite an unlikable main character and that a lot of people did not like the series because of that. But I think that that's very interesting and cool. You don't want to just follow somebody who is blameless, right? Who is perfect. That's boring. This is probably not going to be boring. Again, this is a trilogy that is completed since that I bought the first one, so no excuse to not give this one a try. Next, we have one that is on my TBR, but this was also part of my try reading one chapter and then pick your next read challenge, and I did not really like the first chapter, and that is Godblind by Anna Stevens. Now, I definitely want to give Anna Stevens a try. She is one of the few grimdark female authors that are out there that are pretty well known, so I want to support her, but this was extremely fast-paced. I think that here we also have a god war, or a war between, yes, I remember. I think that we have a clan who has won and they have gods, but then we also have a clan who was defeated and they have gods of their own, if I'm not mistaken. Now this has multiple POVs and the pacing it's neck-breaking, to be honest. It's just too fast. I could immediately see that this is very plot-focused and it's not really character-driven. It reminded me of John Gwynne and how he tells a story, and that's not a plus for me. So it's on my TBR. I am going to give it a chance someday, but I'm not extremely excited to do so because I think that just the writing style and the type of book that this is not really going to be my cup of tea. And then we have one that was one of my highly anticipated releases of 2021. And then I did not read it. I don't know. Well, I know why. I will tell you why in a second. And that is The Empire's Ruin by Brian Staveley. Now, this is the start of his new trilogy that takes place a couple of years after the events of the Chronicle of the Unhewn Throne trilogy, which is one of my favorite grimdark trilogies of all time. However, I have read in between that trilogy and getting this one on my doorstep, Skullthorn, which is the standalone in the same world. And I disliked it quite a bit. Now, I will be the first one to admit that the Chronicle of the Unhoned Throne trilogy was a trilogy that I read when I was new to fantasy, and I absolutely adored it. But since then, a lot of people who started reading it did not like it. And me then not liking Skullthorn makes me a little bit anxious to try this one. Maybe my reading tastes have changed in between. However, I know that that's not fair because a lot of people told me that they also don't like Skullthorn and they still really loved this first installment in the new series. So I think that I really need to give this one a chance, especially because it has a main character of the original trilogy in this book that I absolutely adored. And if you've read the original trilogy and you see this redhead, you know who I mean. But I might be waiting for the release of the second book in the trilogy just so I can more or less binge read them. And binge reading them for me is within the same year. And maybe then I'm on time to also read the third one in a reasonable amount of time. So yeah, one that it's entirely a me problem, and it's not really logical that I haven't given it a chance yet, because I do think that I will love it. I'm just afraid that I won't, if that makes sense. So those are all of the Grimdark and dark fantasy books that I have on my TBR. Please let me know which Grimdark book you are looking forward to trying, maybe in December or in the new year. If, by the way, you are interested in seeing the Grimdark books that I have already read, you can watch this video right here. As always, I do hope that you have enjoyed this video, and see you next time. Bye!